for us to do our share tonight. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys for having me again. My name is Lisa Cronky, and I am a recovered alcoholic, and I'm grateful to be here. Oh, my camera just got really big. Oh God. All right. So last week I started and went over the steps, and just because I always like to do this, because you never know if there's a newcomer in the room, I'm going to go over step one, and we're going to get through the rest of the steps today. I say we, but I'm really anxious to hear your feedback at the end, because I always love that, because we learn from each other. So one of the things that I talked a lot about last week, and I actually talked about this last night, is that I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous thinking that I was going to get sober, or that AA was going to help me get sober, and that maybe I was going to be hanging out with some people who were just like me and who were miserable because I couldn't drink and I could not drink. And so I thought that I was going to be guaranteed, because of those two things, a life of struggle. And so when I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous the first time, and I was in AA for 4.5 years before I got sober, I think that's the story of a lot of people I meet, that unfortunately, that the message in Alcoholics Anonymous, unfortunately, is it's not consistent. It's there's a lot of opinions, there's a lot of different ways that is described or that is talked about in the rooms of AA, that there's a lot of ways to get sober. Now, the big book makes it very clear that we don't have a monopoly. We do not have a monopoly on getting sober. People have been getting sober for thousands of years, way before AA. Salvation Army in the U.S., at least, has been sobering up alcoholics for a lot longer than AA. However, when I walk into a room of Alcoholics Anonymous, there's only one way to get sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, according to the big book, and that's via a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps, and that this spiritual awakening is how I'm going to grow closer to God, helping other alcoholics, and then sobriety is a result of that. It's not the goal, it's not my purpose. When I walked in, it was my purpose, but as I stay, just like the traditions state, as I stay, I'm going to start looking at other people and bearing witness. I'm going to start really trying to help other alcoholics. If sobriety is my main goal, then that stops with me. And that's selfish, because if I'm just trying to walk into Alcoholics Anonymous to stay sober, and I can just go to a bunch of meetings every day and stay sober, then I'm really not helping others by just going to a meeting. I'm going to a meeting to get something rather than give something. And so I really thought that AA had a totally different meaning when I first walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I'm really grateful to be here. I'm grateful that you guys are one of the groups, that carries the message out of the big book, so that we can help more alcoholics and it doesn't just stop with us. But it really goes directly for me, and actually for all of us, to step one. Bill Wilson in the first 100 made it very clear that step one is the only step that I have to get 100%. All the other steps are going to be fluid. I'm going to talk a lot about that today, because especially step two, for me, I carry it with me every day in a way that I thought that step two was about God. But back to step one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable, is that first sentence, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable, is just a restatement of each other. That's why there's an M dash there separating the two thoughts. So it's not that I hear a lot that, the first part of step one is about the body, and the second part of step one is about the mind. And it doesn't say that anywhere in the book. Now, that might be a really great way to teach it or to talk to newcomers about it, but I hesitate to say specifically that that's what the big book intended, because maybe that's the way I teach it sometimes. But the big book in the first 100, because every word in the book is intentional. Every word in the steps, there's not one superfluous word that is just fluffy. Every word is intentional. And so the fact that they put those that M dash and those two thoughts that can kind of interchange. I admitted I'm powerless. We admitted we're powerless over alcohol because of our mind and our body. It states that in the foreword to the first edition, in the very first paragraph, actually in the very first sentence. So if my life would become unmanageable because I'm powerless over alcohol, the $10,000 question is, how am I powerless over alcohol? I thought the question was, why am I powerless over alcohol? So I would fill in the blank with a bunch of thinking words like, well, I'm powerless over alcohol because of my husband or my childhood or my 4 kids or, whatever that I'm powerless over because of blank. That's a thinking word. Like I'm trying to think my way through why I'm an alcoholic. But the question the big book asks is how, like how it works. How is an action word. So how am I powerless over alcohol? Well, I'm powerless over alcohol because of my body first. My body, when I put alcohol into my body, I can't stop abruptly. It's crazy because I always thought that the body part was my biggest problem, that I drink bad and bad things happen when I drink. So that's why my life had become unmanageable. And it's actually not my worst issue. I have an abnormal reaction to alcohol when I put it in my body. It progressed over time for me. I didn't drink alcoholically from day one. A lot of people do. That's just my story. But when I put alcohol into my body, and this progressed over time, like I could not stop. I could not call my numbers. I couldn't do it reliably. And it had nothing to do with how much I drink or what I drink. I always thought that wine was my problem. So I switched to vodka. A lot of people do it the opposite way, but I did it and then when I started drinking vodka straight out of bottle in water bottles, I mean, it went downhill pretty quickly. But my body doesn't know the difference between NyQuil, alcohol, vodka. It is all the same. When I put it in my body, I had this abnormal reaction called a craving. I thought the allergy word was weird to associate with alcoholism. Silkworth is the first one to actually associate alcoholism with the word allergy when he wrote that forward in 39. But it's true. I have an abnormal reaction to alcohol, and my abnormal reaction is that I can't stop abruptly. I can't stop reliably once I start. And so the cool thing about that part is that I could recognize that. I knew I drink bad. I'm not an idiot. I knew that I would wake up the next morning and have a complete blackout and not remember what happened the night before. Now, I might pretend that I knew that I meant to do that with my husband or my family, and I would make a ton of excuses because I didn't want anybody to think I didn't have any control. But if I was really honest with myself, I had no control over the amount I took once I started. And that's exactly that's what they meant when I'm powerless over my body. I'm powerless over control. On page 23, it gives us the really bad news. I always thought that alcohol was my problem. I walked into AA thinking that alcohol was my problem, and if I could just not drink, things would be good. And the bad news is on page 23, it says the main problem of the alcoholic centers in her mind rather than her body, or his mind rather than his body. And the issue with that is I didn't think I had a mental illness. I thought that I had an alcohol problem. But I'm making a decision to never drink again. And I mean it. Like I would wake up the next morning, look at my husband after a horrible car accident or jail spree or whatever it was, whatever my consequences were. And I would look at him and I would say, I was never going to do that again. I'm never going to drink again. Drinking is not more important than my children. I mean, what mother, a good mother, puts alcohol over her children? So I just thought I was a bad mom making bad choices and a terrible person. And then I would wake up and say, I'm never going to do that again. I thought not drinking would fix it. And then I was drunk by 5. So I really did not get that I had this mental blind spot, just like it talks about on page 24, which I think is the holy grail of step 1. It says that the fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent, and we are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force The memory, the suffering, humiliation of even a week or a month ago without defense against the first drink. The one thing that I really love, well, there's several things about this. I mean, this paragraph, it's beautiful and it's hopelessness. I mean, it's so weird to say it's beautiful and it's hopelessness because I have to get to a place where I'm completely hopeless in order for this to work, at least in Alcoholics Anonymous, is that the memory of the suffering, humiliation is not about me taking my clothes off in a bar, doing something really bad at my children's school or baseball practice or all the, silly things I did. The consequences that are horrific. The humiliation is not the humiliation that we all have in common, because remember, this is a common problem and a common solution. So the common problem, you may not have been to jail like me. You all as real alcoholics may not have done some really idiotic stuff with your children at the school. But what we all have in common is this humiliation of lying to ourselves one more time. The lie that I tell myself that I'm never going to drink again. And it's delusional because no one believes it more than I do, and that we drink again. That's what we all have in common. We have this body in common that no matter how much I try, I can't go from the second drink to the third drink or the fourth drink and control that. I always thought that the second or third drink was my problem. That was just changing my mind. But my mind has nothing to do with this allergy once I put it in my body. But when I am stone cold sober after a decade, at least 4.5 years of really problematic, and I'm stone cold sober, and the drink comes to me, the first one, as a really good idea. I don't think there's one time that I can remember where it was like, oh my God, don't do it. Don't pick it up. And for me, that's my story. I know there's several in the book that talk differently than that, but it always came to me as a really good idea. So I have no mental defense against the first drink, which is my problem. And it's funny too, because the relapse, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, but I always thought if I drank, then I was in a relapse. But the relapse happens way before I take the first drink. When I take the first drink, I'm in active alcoholism. I relapse weeks, days, months before I take the first drink, because the relapse is the mental state right before the first drink. And I'm stone cold sober when I think I'm choosing to never drink again. And then I'm choosing that first drink is a good idea. I have lost the power of choice. I can't decide to drink and I can't decide not to drink without some kind of consequences. When I decide to drink, right, when I make a choice, if I'm thinking I'm going to have this allergy that's going to be pervasively, it's going to cause lots of consequences. But the other part is when I think I'm choosing not to drink and I'm just holding on for dear life, one day at a time, I am more miserable than I've ever been in my entire life, is just trying to stay sober without a solution. So step one is truly hopeless. It is a black hole of hopelessness, of being alive, but being dead inside. And it had to be completely hopeless. And the other thing too, which is beautiful about step one, is I do step one outside of the rooms. I don't do step one. It doesn't take me a month to do step one because I do it out there. Once step one was explained to me, and it took about 10 minutes. I mean, this guy was in front of the room. He opened this book to 28 in Roman numerals, 23, 24, and he asked the questions. They're on page 44, the qualifying questions. I knew I was an alcoholic. And I remember sitting there, I told this to you guys last week, but I remember sitting there going, oh, I'm just an alcoholic. I thought I was a bad person. Now, I didn't get hope in step one, but what I tell you I got was relief. Because in the very same sentence that he said, this is hopeless and you will die from it. This is a pervasive, chronic illness that you will die from without a solution. It's been proven. I got relief because he said there is a solution. It's like I've got stage 4 alcoholism, and this man is sitting in front of me. Now, my woman's a sponsor, but this is how I heard it in this rehab I went to, this last rehab. What he talked about was that the solution, rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path, right? That there is a solution that, given the action required, you can be in remission for the rest of your life. That's a promise. So I immediately moved on to step 2 because I knew that my mind, that I was the smartest person in the room and that I was going to drink again. Like, I left that meeting that day, not, oh gosh, thank you for that information. I left that day knowing that I was going to drink again. That to me is a successful step 1. It's not that, oh, thank you for that information. Now I know I can't drink. It's like, thank you for that information. Now I know I will drink. I will drink. It's a guarantee without something getting in the way of me in that first drink, because I will go back into self-will. It talks about in the book a week or a month. So my sponsor followed the directions in the book, and I was through the work in about 3 weeks. Moved on to step 2 rather quickly. She explained that step 2 is a promise for the future. Came to believe. I'm going to come to believe as this progresses. But right now, all I have to have is willingness to believe. Talks about it on page 47. Every step has page numbers associated with it. It's that's why this is a textbook. You know, it's not a novel. But 47 is the key question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe that there's a power greater than myself? And as soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically assure him he is on his way. You know, I thought step 2 was about God, and step 2 was really about willingness. And me looking at the fact that I thought I knew what living on a spiritual basis was going to look like. And that's really pretty arrogant of me. And that step 2 follows me every day for the rest of my life, because every time I think I know something, that I'm not a learner anymore. I become closed-minded to a new way of thinking. So that to me is the crux of step 2, to be willing to do something different and learn a different way of life. I'm willing to, this power greater than me is going to help me to change my thinking, because I can't change my body, but God can change my thinking. Different perspective. Step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over the care of God as we understood him. Step 3 was very simple in its delivery, like the way that she taught me. Step 3 out of the book, I always thought step 3 was about turning it over. Thought those were the key words. I spent years on my knees just turning it over and being drunk by 5, and I didn't understand what turning it over meant, if I was really honest with myself. And the greatest part of what she said to me was that if you knew how to turn it over in step 3, you wouldn't need step 4. That's what the rest of the steps are for. It's about learning. I want to learn. I'm making a decision that I want to learn how to turn it over. I want to learn how to let go and let God. I want to learn how to live on the spiritual basis that 47 talked about. To be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not easy alternatives to face, but it was an easy alternative for me. I didn't have a third door anymore. And so the third step was so simple. The fact that it was a decision to move on to the rest of the work with me and God and my sponsor, because I want to learn how to live on this spiritual basis that you guys keep talking about, because I'm dying of alcoholism. So we got right into it. We got into step 4. I remember reading page 62 and 63. I love the third step prayer. I say the third step prayer every morning on my knees. It's my favorite prayer in the whole book. But I tell you what, I did not understand this whole selfishness thing at step 4. I thought, no, my husband's selfish. That's why I drink. I'm a giver. I am a mother of 4 children. I'm a state. He's selfish. He doesn't understand. And oh my gosh, you guys, but the thing is, you don't have to. I didn't have to see the selfishness. It's almost like the first 100 were prepping us for the 4th and the 5th step when they start talking about selfish and self-centeredness being the root of our troubles on page 62, because I really started to put pen to paper on step 4, and I started to began to see the past and my fears with a different set of glasses. Now, it wasn't totally that way, because I still couldn't wait to talk to my sponsor and get her to feel sorry for me for all the things that have happened to me in my fifth step. But she was very clear that there's two purposes for the fourth step. The first one is that I'm trying to get clear right now. I need to get clear of these things that are blocking me from access to the power. I have no more power in me today, even 14 years later, than I did in that first go around with that fourth step. I have access to the power. So the fourth step is and the fifth step are literally to get me clear right now so I can start to look at step 6. The other thing, the purpose of step 4, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and 5, is to prepare us for step 10. Because step 10 is steps 4 through 9 all rolled up into one. So I am learning how to get through steps 4 and 9 so that I can live in 10, 11, and 12. So in fourth step, she had me do 3 inventories. The resentment inventory, which is my past, things that I'm refeeling, replaying, rethinking. It's not anger, very different. I can get angry at someone who, cuts in front of me in the line, or, gets too close to my car on the highway. But this is something refeeling, replaying, rethinking. Resentment is deep seated, like inside of me. And I use it as an excuse to drink. So fear was the second inventory that the book talks about. And there are cheat pages on every page in the book for all these inventories, which is really good, because when they first started, all they had was this book. They didn't have sponsors on every corner. So they sent this book out in 1939, almost to 1950, and said, good luck. They sent out to these rural places. So this is a really, it's instrumental that we use the book to go through the work. So every one of these inventories has cheat pages. So 64, 65, and 66 are the resentment inventory descriptions. And then 68 and 69 are the fear. And then 69 and 70 are the sex and harms. But the fear inventory, she explained to me, was about the future. Like, where am I afraid of not getting what I want, or afraid of losing something that I have? And that was really easier, because I thought it was about fear of spiders or something. I didn't understand what they were talking, like fear of heights, And fear is this evil and corroding thread that even causes my resentments. And I didn't understand that at all, but I don't have to. I just have to put pen to paper and follow the directions. And then the harms. It talks about on page 69. I thought this was like who I had sex with or something, but that's not it at all. It says, we reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got all this down on paper and we looked at it. It's like relationships where I caused collateral damage. And I wasn't resentful of these people, but I had caused harm. And so it was great to get all 3 of these down on paper. The other instructions that she gave me, which is right out of the book, if you look at page 64, especially 64 and 65, is that it goes up and down. Like in my resentments, who am I angry at? I listed them all below. It talks about that this is a business inventory. It's not emotional inventory. If I'm going across, I'm getting emotional. And in preparation for step 10, I've got to look at these character defects without emotion so that I can find them objectionable. So I'm going to start to write all of the defect, or all the people in the first column. Who am I upset about, or what? Or this is the only time you're going to hear me people, places, and things, because I can be upset with the jail system, which I went through several times. The second column, and I did this this kind of structure for each of the 3 inventories. I did 4 columns in each of the 3. The second column was what happened. What happened? Why do I have this fear? What happened in the harm? Like, was at a party, I tried to make my husband jealous. Like, what happened? And the resentment, why do I have this resentment? And if you look on page 65 too, it's very clear that we keep this short. Yes, we have to go through our life story because we have to look at these details. But we're really trying to ascertain the defects. The other thing is this 65. As I'm going through this, I can start to look at the third column and what did it affect, which is the top of page 65. The key words there on the third column, what did it affect in me that caused me to react or caused me to feel disturbed or caused me to be in fear? What did it react? What did it affect? Did it affect my self-esteem, my security, my social instincts, my ambitions, personal sex relations? What had been interfered with? Sometimes I rarely go to the 12 and 12, but in the 12 and 12, there's some really great, if you're a sponsor, there's some great things when Bill went through the work that he makes note of in the 5th step. It gave me a clear understanding of what the instincts, the 3 instincts were that are interfered with. And then the 4th column. If you look at the bottom of page 66 and the top of page 67, there's a prayer there. And what's interesting about it is they put this prayer between the 3rd column and the 4th column. I never saw that until like 2 or 3 years into my sobriety. And I was at this workshop and this man got up and started explaining why the resentment prayer is in the middle of the 3rd column and the 4th column. And if you look at the history, it was done purposely. It's like, if I'm putting all of these people and all these things that I'm resentful and what it affected, if I can say a prayer before I start to look and list my mistakes, then I'm going to start seeing my mistakes more clearly because I'm not blaming everyone else. These people are human and they make mistakes too. And I'm asking God to change me, not them, but me. Like, you don't have to change in order for me to be okay. And so when I say this prayer at the top of page 67, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry. Thy will be done. And then referring to our list again, 1 paragraph down, putting out of the minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person entirely. Where were we to blame? It's really cool to have that prayer in that place because we're always going to go to God so that I can start to more clearly see my mistakes in that 4th column. So I'm doing a 4th column where taking everybody else out of the picture, because that's how I've got to do step 10. And where were my mistakes? Where was I selfish? Where did I allow that to have so much power over me that I use that as an excuse to drink? How selfish is of that is that I'm using somebody else's actions to drink, and then I'm driving drunk with my children. And it talks about it on page 23 that although these excuses have a certain plausibility, none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic drinking bout creates. But I thought this 4th card, this 1st and the 2nd column, were the most important parts of the inventory. The cool thing about step 5 is that I'm sitting down with my sponsor and we're looking at these 4 columns. She's not concentrating on the 1st column and the 2nd column. She's concentrating on the 3rd column and the 4th column, because if I can start to see how these other people or things have disturbed me in my, what it talks about, my self-esteem, my ambitions, my money, my pocketbook, then I can start to see how I'm reacting to those things, which is column 4, my reaction, whether it's feelings or whatever that reaction is, my selfishness, my dishonesty. I can start to see those things more clearly, how I got the ball rolling and use those as an excuse to drink. Like, I'm an alcoholic. There is no excuse. That's the mental illness part of it. I make it in my head like it's plausible that you're causing me to drink because of your selfishness, when it's actually my selfishness that got the ball rolling. I can start to see these things more clearly in step 5. One of the things that my sponsor now says, I mean, I love this, is that all 5th steps should look alike. And the reason why all fifth steps should look alike is because we're not focusing on the details. We're focusing on the defects. And aren't all human nature defects the same? Selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, fear, judgment, pride, all of the things that are blocking me from God. The details in the fourth step, the first and the second column, are only getting me to the defects. It talks about it on page 72. In the middle of the paragraph, it says, this requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we've admitted to ourselves, to God, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. So this brings us to the fifth step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter. And then it goes on to say that a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. And that's the beauty of someone sponsoring. Like everybody has the first, woman or person that they sponsor. There's the book, but the fifth step is not complicated. We're really literally sitting down and doing an inventory. If you don't know what questions to ask, the questions are on page 62. I mean, literally the questions are there. Driven by 100 forms of self-pity, self-delusion, self-seeking, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. I mean, sometimes they hurt us. And that's columns 1, 2, and 3 right there. Seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some point in the past, we have made decisions based on self, which later place us in a position to be hurt. That's brilliant. I mean, it's literally brilliant the way that they take the fourth and the fifth step. They feed it back into page 62. The questions are there in the third step, getting us ready so that we can see these defects of character. My sponsor, when I was doing my fifth step, she read page 72 and 73 to me. And then we read half of page 75. And then she closed my book. She took my fourth step, and then we started talking. And we talked for about, I think it was like 2 hours maybe. It wasn't, for me, the way I was taught was that if it's any longer than 2.5 hours, then you're probably concentrating on column 1 and column 2 too much and not getting into the details not getting defects, because patterns of behavior, all those columns are for is to show us the patterns of behavior that illumify, the defects. When I was doing it, she had a column 6. She was writing stuff down as I was talking. And what she was writing down were my column 6 defects of character, but also she was jotting down some of the preparation for step 8, some lists of people. If you look at the page, if you look at the bottom of page 75, after I did my fifth step, I went home and spent an hour, just like it talks about at the bottom of page 75, carefully reviewing what we've done. So I looked at my fourth step. I made sure we thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better. I'm getting to know myself better. So I'm having access to God. I can see the defects. So I'm starting to get to know God better because the defects are being cleared away. And then carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything. Let me clear my throat. Oh, gosh, sorry. So I've asked if I've omitted anything. So omission is different than forgetting. Like there's a lot of stuff I forgot because I'm a blackout drunk. But if I'm omitting something on purpose, then that's really not good because I have got to do this thoroughly. And step 1 assures me that I'm going to do this thoroughly because, look, I've got to choose. Am I going to do a fourth and a fifth step thoroughly, or am I going to go back to that black hole of drinking? And I do not want to ever go back there. So no fourth step, no fifth step is ever, oh, you're on your fourth step. No, that was a lot more scary than anything I'd ever been through before. So the fourth step didn't seem scary to me. I reviewed my 4 steps, spent 1 hour by myself. I remember I was cross-legged in my bed. I remember the day. And then she moved me on to step 6. So after that, the 6th step is on the page, top of page 75, 76, and 77. The first 2 paragraphs are 6 and 7. I just did a 6-step talk last night. And, one of the things about the 6th and 7th step, I know they're only 2 paragraphs, but they're vitally important because in step 6, I can see these defects of character. It's not just recognizing my selfishness. I have to find them objectionable. I have to find them objectionable because my real purpose is to fit ourselves, to give maximum service to God and the people about us. And if I'm fitting myself, then my selfishness and my dishonesty is going to get in the way of me being able to bear witness and help another alcoholic. So the reason I'm fitting myself is not for me. It's so that I can bear witness to God's glory. I can't bear witness to God's glory if I'm living in selfishness. Now, it doesn't mean that the selfishness, the dishonesty, and all that's going to be removed. That's on God's time. But I have to be willing because I find them objectionable. That's the biggest part of step 6 that's crucial to step 10, which we'll talk about in a second. And then step 7, I got on my knees. I asked God to remove these defects of character, to take the good and the bad. The 7th step prayer is beautiful. My Creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and to my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. You know, the 7th step prayer is really beautiful for me to look at every day because it's all about humility. Like, I used to take the accolades for being a great employee, a great mom. Look how great of a person I am. I did, great in college, these high GPA. Look, the thing that I do best right now in my life is drink. Everything else is God's grace on me, because I should be dead right now. I can't take the accolades for all these good things. I'm like actually kind of afraid to take the accolades for any. I'm like, yes, that's how I can bear witness to God's glory. Yes, God's blessings. God has blessed me every day of my life. And that's why I'm not going to take, He's all of me, good and bad, because I just can't give Him all the defects of character. It's all or nothing. And the other thing too is that I don't have to know all my defects of character. I just have to be willing to give them to God. God already knows what they are. This is really about willingness and humility, on my knees, asking God to change me, not my circumstances. I'm not praying for someone else. And then I got after it in steps 8 and 9. The one thing about step 8, which I think is really interesting, is if there was ever a step that I was really not looking forward to, it was step 9. So when I first made my list, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all, it doesn't say made a list of all persons we had harmed and were willing to make amends to them all. It says became willing, just like the promise in the 2nd step. Like in the 2nd step, it says came to believe that a power, not in a power. So the 8th step is kind of like that too. It says that I'm going to become willing, not that I am willing to make amends. So there's some words there that are really important. So my sponsor was crucial when she said to me, make a list. Do not make your list based on step 9. I just want you to make a list. And those are the directions, the specific directions that it tells us on page 76, that I am going to make this list just of people that I've harmed. I got it from my 4th step, so I'm never going to burn my 4th. I still have my original 4th step. Sometimes I'll look at that and I go, I wish I still had the problems that I thought were bad then today. Anyway, that's a whole different story. So I'm looking at this, my 4th step, and what my sponsor and I talked about my 5th step, and I'm making this 8-step list. Then I sat down with my sponsor and we started to take a look at the 9th step. So she went through pages 76 all the way to 84. The greatest part about this, there's a lot of pages to the amends, is it specifically talks about each different kind of amends, from a criminal offense to other people, to relationships, to employers. I highlight domestic troubles. It gives us all these different situations to help us get through the amends process. But one of the most helpful things that she taught me during that period of time is that there's three specific criteria that I've got to be aware of, or I need to pray about before I walk into the amends. They're on page 77. The first one in the middle of the end of the first paragraph says a sincere to set right the wrong, sincere desire to set right the wrong. So I've got to look at my motives for each one. As I'm going through my 8-step list to prepare for 9, I'm going to look at each one. Do I have a sincere desire to set right the wrong? Or am I trying to get a better relationship with this person for the future? Am I trying to get back with my husband and I'm making this amends so that he'll like me again? Or am I focusing on setting right the wrong in the past and has nothing to do with the outcome of the future? And if I have a sincere desire to set right the wrong, then I should not be upset with the outcome, whether he forgives me or not. All my desire is to set right the wrong. There's no desire for any expectations or outcome or anything other than me setting right the wrong. The other thing, the other second criteria, which is really important, is the very last sentence of the last paragraph. It says, we go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit. I love it right above it when it says, it may be that he has done more harm than we have done him, and although we've acquired a better attitude towards him, we are still not too keen about admitting our faults. Nevertheless, with a person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. It is harder to go to an enemy than to a friend, but we find it much more beneficial to us. We go in a helpful and forgiving spirit. It's a spirit. I remember my mom was the hardest amends I've ever had to make, and we still don't speak to each other. And I remember telling my sponsor that was my, I just don't think I'm ever going to make amends. And guess what my first amends was? Don't ever tell your sponsor that that's something you're not going to do. At least my sponsor was like, well, that's the hardest one. It's going to be much more beneficial to you. And that's how I became willing to make amends to them all, is as I went through the process of making amends, I started to get more willing because I started to see God showing up when I thought I knew what the outcome was going to be, and it was different. So I went to these people in a helpful and forgiving spirit because I never wanted to go to that black hole ever again. So I was going to be helpful and forgiving, sincere desire to set right the wrong. And then the other criteria before I walk in and do the amends is at the top of page 78. And it says, the last sentence, if our manner is calm, frank, and open, we will be gratified with the result. The cool thing about that is calm. I'm going to pray before I walk into the amends. Frank, I'm going to be honest about what I did unless it hurts someone else. And then I'm going to listen. I'm literally going to be open. And what that means is open-minded without saying a word. And that's really hard to do, to become a listener, a learner, and not be the know-it-all or justify, what I did. And it's preparation for step 10. And then it talks about the bottom of page 77, how we make the amends in the moment. Under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. We simply tell them that we will never get over drinking until we have done our utmost. No matter how they react to it, they're not going to affect my drinking. I have to do this. Sweep away my side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so. Never telling him what he should do. His faults are not discussed. The 9th step, I think for me, it was the most powerful of the steps to that point when I was a newcomer, because I thought I knew what the amends were going to look like and the outcome was going to be. And almost to all of them, except for my 13-year-old, they were different than what I thought that they were going to be. So it helped me to start to build faith, because it showed me that I think I know and I don't. God's got a better plan and a bigger plan than I could have ever imagined. And my faith started to really grow through the amends process, because I started to see different results. I just put my faith in God and did the action, no matter how I felt, just like it talked about in step 4 and 5. And I just did it. And then she quickly moved me on to 10, 11, and 12. If you look at page 84, it talks a lot about in this particular step that this is a maintenance step. Well, there's a woman in my group, or my home group, that I love it when she says it's like maintaining a garden. You're going to pull the weeds. You're going to turn the soil. You're going to do all of the things to prepare the garden to maintain it so that it will grow new seeds. And that's exactly what this 10th step is talking about, is that I'm going to maintain my spiritual fitness so that I can start to grow or continue to grow closer to God. While I'm maintaining it, it is a growth step. And it talks here that as I'm starting step 10, I'm going to continue to make my amends as I'm going through the process, because blackout drunk, I'll never be finished making my amends. I'll be making amends for the rest of my life for stuff, women I see in the grocery store. I'm like, oh my God, I forgot about carpool. I forgot what I did to her. And anyway, so I'll be making those amends forever. So I'm going to start step 10 as I'm going through that process. And it talks about that here. We vigorously commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. If you read on through that whole paragraph, it talks about the 5 parts of step 10. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear, which is 5 and 6. So remember when I was talking about step 6, I can watch for selfishness, dishonesty. I can see when I'm getting a resentment. But the key thing is that I've got to find that objectionable. Like, I've got to find that objectionable, because I can't fit myself to be of maximum service to God and the people about me if I'm in selfishness. And I think that was really helpful to me to see it, that it wasn't a defect. It wasn't a bad thing, my selfishness. I started looking at selfishness as something that was blocking me from God, kind of like that business inventory, rather than a shame thing. Like, oh my gosh, I've been selfish and dishonest again. I'm not doing this thing spiritually correct. And I can't believe I did that. Morbid reflection. I started looking at these defects of character as blocking me from God, instead of shaming myself around, because I'm still dishonest. This whole progress and not perfection is not the absence of character defects. I just have a toolkit, and I don't use them to shame myself anymore. I use them as an opportunity to get closer to God. I'm inspired by women who are imperfect. I'm not inspired by women who are perfect. So we ask God at once to remove them. We discuss them with someone immediately and make amends quickly if we've harmed anyone. And then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help, which is step 12. This is literally where the practical application of the steps 4 through 9 and the spiritual application of how we're going to carry this in the rest of our lives collide. Like, I'm practical because I've learned how to start to see these defects of character in my everyday life. I start to find them objectionable in step 6. I'm starting to look at them. I'm willing to let them go. I pray to God first. Like, I don't call my sponsor first. My sponsor will not speak to me. She'll ask me on a 10th step, have you gone to God first? And if not, the other thing she won't allow me to do is, well, my husband's Dave. Well, Dave did this, so I got pissed. I got upset. I got resentment. She will not speak to me. She goes, I don't care what Dave did. The conversation looks like this. I went to God first, but I'm still feeling resentful. I was selfish. I was dishonest. It doesn't matter what the column in the 1 and 2 are. How it affected me and what my mistakes were. That's what my sponsor wants to hear. And so then it talks about the 10th step promises, which, just like the 9th step promises, which are on every AA wall in the world, I wish these 10th step promises were on the walls, because they're beautiful. One thing I want to highlight, because I don't have a lot of time. On page 85, in the process of reading these promises, there's one that really sticks out. It says, we feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. I remember when this mentor man that took me through the steps in this rehab place I was, he said, Lisa, I didn't quit this time. And he was like 18 years sober, I think. He said, I didn't quit. I didn't swear it off. I focused on the work. I didn't focus on the alcohol. I focused on doing the work, and God quit for me. Like, I didn't quit this time. It's the only time it ever worked. And I hung on to that. So still to this day, I didn't swear it off. And it's the only time when I quit focusing on quitting drinking that it actually worked. So the 10-step promises to me are vital. I'm not fighting anything or anyone. I've ceased fighting anyone. Sanity has returned. I'm not interested in liquor. I recoil from it as a hot flame, even though alcohol is not my problem. I love my way of life. I love being an alcoholic, a recovered alcoholic. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I'm recalling it as from a hot flame because, although my friends can drink normally, and I miss it sometimes. Don't get me wrong. I don't think there's an alcoholic out here who says, oh, I'd never miss it. I miss it sometimes. My son graduated from college this year and they're all drinking old fashions and stuff. And, but the thing is they wake up with a hangover and I wake up wanting to kill myself. I've got this suitable substitute that comes in the form of step 12 that I've found through this program. And so no glass of wine ever gave me the high that when a little girl comes up and says, thank you for helping my mom, like no glass of wine ever gave me that high. And so as I'm walking through this, and it is sworn off, this as I'm walking through this journey, this suitable substitute has got to be there or I'm going to turn to the drink again because life will happen. And without growing in my toolkit, it's going to get worse. So step 11 is really crucial. I think step 11 is probably the most crucial of 10, 11, and 12 because it's the one step that women stop doing because nobody knows if you're doing it. If I'm trying to get this personal relationship with God, as it talks about on page 59 in the actual step, sought through prayer and meditation, which is what I'm doing, how, prayer and meditation, to get what result? To improve our conscious contact with God as we understand him. If I'm trying to get this personal relationship with this God that's inside of me, it's not ethereal, this weird thing I thought was up here, then I'm got to build this relationship every day, just like I build human relationships. Like if I don't talk to my sister once a year, I'm not going to know what she's doing. If I talk to my sister once a month, I might know what her kids are doing or her schedule for school or, superfluous stuff. But if I'm talking to my sister every day for 5 minutes, at least 5 minutes, we are going to build a relationship. You just can't help but build a relationship. So in my 11th step, just like it talks, I want this personal, this conscious contact, which is praying and meditating, talking and listening every day. And that's how I'm going to build this personal relationship. It talks about 86, retiring at night, what that looks like on page 86 and top of page 87, what my mornings are going to look like. It gives me specific prayers if I want to use them. And then it also talks about in meditation, I'm never to pray for myself, except for when it would help others. Me being selfish is I cannot bear witness to others if I'm being dishonest. So these prayers are not even about me. My alcoholism is not about me. It's all about how I can fit myself to be of maximum service to God and the people about me. And then step 12, which is beautiful step. If you look at page 60, there's a whole chapter called Working with Others that gives specific direction on sponsorship and all the different situations that we have, because the first 100, they learn how to do this and do it well. And they didn't learn how to do it and they didn't put a ribbon on it and give it to us. There's a lot of people who died. Like there was a lot of things that didn't work. That's why they say no middle of the road solution worked for them. They tried that first. So as they're writing all this stuff and all the things that worked, key to all of this was going out and carrying the message. And if you look at step 12 on page 60, it says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result, not a result. Like, it's the only result is a spiritual awakening of these steps, not my opinions, not a workbook, the steps, all of them, the suggested program. That's what gives me the spiritual awakening. We tried to carry this message. So it doesn't, to carry this message to alcoholics, it doesn't say that we carry this message successfully. It says all my job is to try to tell you what I did to get and stay sober and to stay recovered. Big difference between sobriety and recovery. What I did. I'm not going to tell you what you should do. That's what therapists do. And my parents, I'm going to tell you what I did. It's a totally different way of looking at alcoholism, because I'm not here to tell you what you should do. How cool is that? Go drink if you want to, but call me when you're done. I'm going to carry this message, the message out of the book, very clear message to alcoholics. Singleness of purpose. To have nothing against drug addicts. My son is one, but I am an alcoholic. I'm going to carry this message to alcoholics. I can't hear drug addicts' footsteps. I can't relate to a lot of that. And so I'm going to carry this message to alcoholics. I have to be convinced you're an alcoholic, and she has to be convinced that she's an alcoholic. And then we can walk shoulder to shoulder through the steps and to practice these principles in all of my affairs. Is kind of like living amends. I don't even know where that came about, but if I'm practicing these principles in all of my affairs, someone is going to see me as a successful, recovered alcoholic, successful in life, and ask me. It happens. I mean, come on, you guys. Alcoholism is pervasive. They're going to ask me, what did you do to stay sober? Why is your life so beautiful and you're an alcoholic? That doesn't match. And that's exactly what I think our job is. And we talked about this last night as alcoholics, is to present this program in such a way that people are attracted to it. Like, alcoholism is not a bad thing. It's not like this horrible curse. My past is the greatest asset I have, because that is why these women who are sitting in front of me trust me. God removes the shame when I use my experience to help another woman. And that's why she trusts me, is because of my experience. The shame goes away. Alcoholism is the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life. And I love my children. But without it, I wouldn't have my faith. I wouldn't have this beautiful life of constantly growing, constantly learning. I would just be so wrapped up in things that are just so immaterial. And I tell you what, the other thing too is I wouldn't get to see the light come on, the light bulb, the beautiful light bulb, when a woman finds out that she's just an alcoholic and that there's a beautiful life on the other side. And it's so much better than I could have ever imagined. And that's all I have. Thank you, guys.